Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is a Magnum engine. The Magnum was released in the early 1990s. It's really just an updated LA engine, very similar to those made since 1964. Since Chrysler wasn't making rear-wheel drive cars during the Magnum's run, with the exception of the Viper that is, these were found exclusively in trucks, like this one. They also featured an updated ring package. And one of the great things about these engines is you can routinely pop the heads off over 200,000 miles and you'll see cross-hatching. The Magnum came in the same displacements as the late LA series engines. They came in 5.9 liter, 360 cubic inch, and 5.2 liter, 318 cubic inch flavors. The engines are visually identical. The quickest and easiest way to tell them apart, this cutout in the harmonic balancer is only found on 360s. I really like this engine series, and I think they're fantastic for swapping into older vehicles that you want to modernize a little bit. Here's one of the main reasons why. This little bunch of wiring, which should really be in a weatherproof box, is all it takes to make this engine run and the transmission shift, on top of the factory harness from the truck, of course. The engine mounting ears on the Magnum block are identical, give or take, to the old LA engine block, which means if your old hot rod or truck came with an LA engine, you can bolt one of these in there, no problem. Given the complexity of a modern Hemi swap and the expense, this is really like the LS swap of the Chrysler world, except for a few key drawbacks. The large Kegger aluminum intake is a fantastic piece for making torque and possibly even fuel efficiency, but it's a major limiting factor as far as horsepower production is concerned. When compared to some flavors of 6-liter LS engines, being a very similar displacement, that seems fair. This thing's down about 100 horsepower. However, if you're like me, and all you want is a muscle car that you can turn the key on, drive to work, take out on the highway, get okay fuel mileage, and do block-long burnouts, this thing will do just fine. Speaking of the Kegger intake brings me around to another common issue on Magnum engines. Chrysler apparently did not know how to make paper gaskets in the 1990s. The lower plate gasket on the Kegger is a common failure. When that goes, you get a vacuum leak inside the engine that pulls in oil, ruins the tune and economy, and fouls spark plugs, does all sorts of other things. But the timing cover gasket is another common issue. At the shop, every failed water pump I do is accompanied by a timing cover gasket, because if it's not leaking when it gets there, it will be soon. In this particular application, which I think we'll talk about a little later on when it drives, I chose to swap the entire drivetrain out of a 99 Ram 2500 two-wheel drive pickup, which brought along another major flaw. As any Cummins owner knows, Chrysler also did not know how to make transmissions in the 1990s. These 4.6 REs and their very similar relatives, larger and smaller, must have been responsible for sending more trucks to the scrapyard than cash for clunkers. I knew the transmission was failing when I installed it, but I took a gamble in the hopes that I could drive the car. And I did. About 200 miles. And then I decided to take a gamble and see if I'm any good at rebuilding automatic transmissions. How do you think that turned out? If I had any common sense at all, I'd put an older style transmission back in this thing and be done with it. But I'll tell you what, it really cruised well on the highway in overdrive when it worked. In spite of the shortcomings, I really do think this is a fantastic engine in its original application and for swaps, and I hope to be enjoying this one again sometime before I'm 40. Now, of course, if you want to make your Magnum engine worse, you can bolt a carburetor and an intake onto it and it'll work just fine. In fact, it will make more horsepower. It's what everyone on the internet seems to do, especially over on this particular website I won't mention. But I'm here to tell you, the factory injection is easy to make work, and it's very rewarding. Here's one in its natural habitat, as you'll find it in pick-a-pole. This one's broken too. That's not my fault.